Welcome to Withdraw Consent. I'm Victor. He's Jack. So, Jack, what is the most tyrannical, unconstitutional legislation you know of?
Okay, we're going to talk to DeSantis. We're going to show you this legislation and show you that he is the worst.
Okay.
Like there's some people who are bad. He's the worst. So first of all, people are kind of confusing the timeline here. There's two different pieces of legislation.
Okay.
But people are kind of wrapping them together. So there was one in 2019, and it's Florida House Bill 741. And then there's another one that just happened in 2023, just a couple days ago, and that's called Florida House Bill 269.
Okay.
They're both pegged as anti-Semitism bills, but they're not. The title of the one in 2019 is anti-Semitism. The title of the 2023 one that just passed is Public Nuisance.
Oh, okay.
Now, we're going to go into the actual legislation and see how ridiculous this is. This is the most insane stuff I've ever read. I haven't read a ton of legislation in my life, but this is just the worst. So we're going to start at the 2019 one.
Okay.
And we just want to mention that Governor DeSantis flew to Israel so he could sign this bill in Israel, and it's the first ever Florida legislation signed in a foreign country.
Okay. Did he do the whole wearing his costume thing? And
Yeah, he wore a costume.
Okay.
He prayed at the Wailing Wall for no hurricanes.
Okay.
And in 2023, a couple days ago, he just went back. He's probably still there now. And so he could sign another bill. I mean, and wait till you see the contents of this. This is terrible. Okay. So I'm going to pull up the first bill. This is HB 741. And it gives an introduction of what the bill does. I've highlighted it for you. It says an act relating to anti-Semitism. And then the first thing is prohibiting discrimination in the Florida K through 20 public education system based on religion. Second is requiring a public K to 20 educational institution to take into consideration anti-Semitism under certain instances of discrimination. Third part is it defines anti-Semitism and then just goes through some other legally stuff. Okay. So the first section of this bill, it basically, when you're looking at what I'm showing you on the screen, everything underlined are things added to previous stuff.
What do you mean added to previous?
Like if it's got a previous section, like let me put one up on the screen right now, you'll see that there's an underline, just the word religion. So that other stuff's pre-existing and they've added religion.
Oh, it's like an addendum to.
Yeah. If you see it struck through, that means they're deleting it from former stuff.
Oh, okay.
So the whole first section of the bill just adds religion as a protected class.
Okay.
So it's race, ethnicity, national origin, gender, disability, religion, or marital status.
Okay.
I don't want to bury the lead on this. I really want to talk about this, adding the religion thing later. But we're just going to, so basically you can get through a couple pages, and I got a link in the description, to all this so you can go see the legislation yourself. And so basically this bill affects only the K through 20 public school system.
And 20 is like,
we're going college here.
oh, okay.
So we're going,
like community college?
like state funded. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, 20 gets you 8 years of education, I imagine, from 12 to 20. So it can get you up through college.
Oh, I was thinking 20 years old, like 20th grade.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
K to 20. And so that's 21 years of state education this is covering, we'll just say.
Okay. Yeah.
So now I'm going to section 7, and it says a public K through 20 educational system must treat discrimination by students or employees or resulting from institutional policies motivated by anti-Semitic intent in an identical manner to discrimination motivated by race. Now we're going to describe what anti-Semitism is in a moment, a little bit farther in this bill. And then it says, for purposes of this section, the term anti-Semitism includes a certain perception of the Jewish people, which may be expressed as hatred towards Jewish people, rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism directed toward a person, his or her property, or toward Jewish community institutions or religious facilities. Kind of standard right there.
Okay.
Right? It's just hateful things towards people of the Jewish religion. Now they're going to mix up ethnic Jews, or what I call Hebrews, or the religious Jews, which I call religious Jews, and they're going to pretend like it's all like, if they were, say, like an atheistic Hebrew, they're going to say, oh, this is religionist for you to discriminate against him. Do you know what I'm saying?
Because they're still a Jew.
Right, because they're saying Jew. And we did another video about this. I guess I'll probably link in the description below.
Okay.
But now we're going to do examples of anti-Semitism, okay? So the first one, just standard. Calling for aiding or justifying the killing or harming of Jews, often in the name of a radical ideology or an extremist view of religion. Fine.
Okay. Yeah.
Fine.
Reasonable.
Right. Now we're going to get wild here. You ready? Subsection 2, making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews, such or the power of Jews as a collective, especially but not exclusively the myth about a world Jewish conspiracy or of Jews controlling the media, economy, government, or other societal institutions. Break it down.
So what you're saying is it's illegal to talk about in schools the things that you see with your eyes.
Right.
Okay.
Because that they are now taking whole parts of reality and saying that is now a definition of anti-Semitism.
Okay.
And then that is now illegal in schools.
Interesting. Wow. But they don't control everything.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You just can't talk about them.
You can't talk about that.
Oh, okay.
It's amazing. So I was saying, like, say you were a professor and you said, okay, there's some people out there and they say that, okay, the Jews are the CEOs of all the major media corporations, you know? Write a paper whether or not you think that that's a myth or not. But keep in mind, there's only one correct answer, or I'm going to have you hauled away by a man with a gun to lock you in a room.
Yeah.
What?
So you have to write a complete fictional paper.
You have to write the narrative.
Right.
The narrative that DeSantis was given in Israel.
Wow.
Because I just did a felony. If I was in Florida, do you know what I'm saying? This is ridiculous. You know?
Wow.
Okay. So basically, the next one just says you can't accuse a Jew of doing things that Jews did. Do you know what I'm saying? So like you're a white guy and I say, oh, those white guys back in 1945, you know what they did at Eisenhower's death camp? I can't blame you for it just because you're white.
But based on this law, the only people that are safe are Jews. You can still blame white people for slavery, but you can't.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
That is true, though. That is true.
It's discriminatory just in itself.
Right.
Okay.
And then the last one is just a doozy.
Okay.
Now keep in mind, we're doing examples of anti-Semitism. So this is probably not including them all. Number 4, accusing Jews as a people or the state of Israel of inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust.
So in this one, we're not allowed to talk about science.
We're not allowed to talk about science.
Okay.
So this video is coming out, and if you just check in next week on our channel, we're going to do a 3-part series on the Holocaust being published next week. Spicy. And we're going to talk about things, science. We're just going to talk about science. And basically, spoiler alert, in the 40s, they used to say 4.5 million Jews were gassed at Auschwitz. Now, if you go to the Holocaust Memorial Encyclopedia webpage, or run by the Jewish people, it says 1 million were killed at Auschwitz. So if I talked about that right there on a college campus, I would go to jail because I am saying that at one point, Jews exaggerated the Holocaust.
Totally.
Factually true, scientifically proven.
They've literally changed the plaque. You can go online and see the old
plaque.
version and the new version.
I'll put the plaque on the screen right now where it says there's 4.5, but I know I can find the 4 million one.
Yeah. I've seen screenshots of both of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll put that up, and then I'll also put the numbers from the encyclopedia up right now so you can just see. We're not really talking about that right now, but we're talking about you can't do that.
You aren't allowed to talk about this.
Right. So you're not allowed to teach history that actually happened if it relates to the Jews and it's anything derogatory.
Right.
It's kind of like if you took this law and you said, this is about white people, this law, we're going to make this. Okay. Don't you dare mention slavery.
Right.
Don't you dare mention colonialism. That's jail.
Yeah.
No, you can talk about these things.
But imagine how offended everyone would be if this was about any other race besides Jews.
I agree.
Yes.
I agree. And so, okay, so we're moving along here. Another example of anti-Semitism is accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than to the interest of their own nations.
So again, not being able to acknowledge what you see with your own eyes.
Right. So like the same Jewish guy, I'll put a title on the screen, but it's like Fink is his name or something. I forget, something like that. He went with DeSantis to Israel. He's a Jewish American, you know, and he's in the Florida Senate. He's in the Florida legislature. I'm not sure. I'll put it up on the screen. And he went both times with him to Israel to sign this pro-Israel bill. If you pointed that out in a K through 20, you would go to jail. It's true.
Right.
Does this guy care about America, Florida? He does. He probably does. But number one is Jews in Israel, his people, his homeland, you know?
But it's also interesting if you think about it that this is also showing that DeSantis, not being a Jew, still values Israel more than...
Right. And I would have named
incredible.
him here, but it said accusing Jewish citizens.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So he doesn't apply as a Jewish citizen. So.
But if DeSantis, who isn't a Jew, you can say he is like that, how much more is an actual Jew going to be loyal to...
certain Jews?
Yeah.
Because there was a letter put out by, I think it was 32, like, famous Jews in Florida, like
prominent
people of standing, and they said, "Whoa, look at this bill." They're like, "Hey, this is wild. This is all this Israel stuff." The next section is all about just loving Israel, or going to jail if you don't. And they said, "Whoa, this is making us look bad." And then the response was, "Well, 699,000, Jews do like this, and 32 don't, in Florida." That's what they were basically saying. So. Now we're going to go in the next section. We're going to do examples of anti-Semitism related to Israel include, number 1, demonizing Israel by using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism to characterize Israel or Israelis, drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis, or blaming Israel for all interreligious or political tensions.
Wow.
Okay, the last one's kind of stupid because blaming Israel for all interreligious or political tensions, like that problem between India and Pakistan,
right.
The Hindus, the Muslims, right, that would be silly. You know what I'm saying? So I think that blaming for all is nonsense. You can't draw comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. So you can say everybody in this country who you don't like is Hitler incarnate.
Right.
But then when it's like Jewish policy, Netanyahu, it's like... No, not even war crimes. Not even lots of war crimes. Okay. This is ridiculous. You can't use symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism to characterize Israel or Israelis.
And what type of symbols are we talking about?
Swastikas?
But that's not...
Right. Why would you use them to characterize Israel or Israelis? They're just covering all their bases here.
I guess.
This is like we burnt the Constitution in the back porch right now, right before we sign this. In the back porch in Israel, we'll say.
Yeah.
And then, okay.
Maybe it's like cartoons where they have a giant nose or something. Like,
I see.
It's
symbols and images.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't do the giant nose.
Maybe. I mean, that's all I can come up with.
Right, because it would be a better America if you just don't have a First Amendment. It'd be great, because DeSantis, he's wonderful.
Only in this area.
Right, only in this one area.
Yeah.
Right. Black people, you could do big lips. White people, you could do big old cranium cavemen. You know what I'm saying? But no, okay. Anyways, part 2 on... anti-Semitism related to Israel, applying a double standard to Israel by requiring behavior of Israel that is not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation, or focusing peace or human rights investigations only on Israel. Amazing.
Is that a thing?
But what they're saying is, anytime that you're going to put any type of expectation of good behavior on Israel, they're going to call you on this.
Because it's anti-Semitic.
Yeah, they're going to say jail because you're talking bad about Israel. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then focusing on peace or human rights investigations only on Israel. So if you say, let's look at one of the many, many, many times Netanyahu committed war crimes. Let's look at one of them. They're going to say, you're not doing a fair assessment. It doesn't matter whether you're doing it. You could have just talked about the Armenian genocide by the Turks, They're just going to use this.
So it's protection of Jews on the entire planet. Basically.
Right. But in this section, it's just all Israel, though, the state of Israel.
Right.
DeSantis is making American legislation just to protect you from talking bad about the state of Israel, because his loyalty is to, not America. It's not America
Does
first.
he have this law about protecting bad speech against America?
No.
Oh.
No, you just say what you want.
Weird.
But say what you want. That's the First Amendment. Wow. So you can, I'm glad you can talk bad about America, because we run down our video list. We talk about all the things, and we want to be able to talk about all the things. We just don't want to be controlled by a foreign group of people who prevents us from talking about them. Oh, felony. Dang it.
Yep.
Glad I don't live in Florida. I already can't go to Europe. Now I can't go to Florida.
Yeah.
And you could say, you're not going to teach in the K-20 school system. Wait till we get to the 2023 bill, and you'll find out why I can't go to Florida. Number 3 reason, example of anti-Semitism, Israel is delegitimizing Israel by denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination and denying Israel the right to exist.
Do a lot of people do that?
The only people that are denied the right to self-determination are white people in the world. That's the only people. But they're like, hey, just in case, don't do it here. Now, some people do deny Israel the right to exist. They say that land's for the Palestinians. I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying? It's much more Middle Eastern people have a strong feeling about this. You know, you should be able to express that feeling, you know?
Yeah.
I had an Uber ride, Palestinian guy, you know, and I asked him, what do you think about the Jews? And he's like, oh, they're cool. They're cool. He just immigrated. There was in his young 20s. And I'm like, this guy's lying, you know? And I keep asking him, and I bring up this and I bring up this. And it's a Uber, what is it when you share the Uber?
Uber, I don't remember.
Whatever it is, where you're sharing the Uber. So there's this black guy in there too, you know? And I'm like, well, what about this shirt that they wear in Israel where it shows the pregnant Palestinian woman and has a bullseye on her stomach and it says one shot, 2 kills?
Oh, wow.
And I just keep talking to him and he's like, I hate them. He said, I'm so sorry. I can't. And the black guy's just sitting there like, oh, wow, what's going on?
Things are
here?
getting real.
And I'm like, no, I understand that, you know? And then later on, I had an Israeli guy, you know, like a highfalutin guy. And I was taking him on this long ride. And I explained to him that story. And we talked all about it, this and that. And at the end, he got out and he walked over to my window. He said, man, this is the best conversation I've ever had in an Uber drive. Because we were just talking about, like, right, we're not being hateful. I'm like, what are your feelings about this?
You're trying to get his perspective.
Yeah. But don't say that in Israel in the Cage 20 or you go to jail. And then here's the little clause that they put after that in pink. However, criticism of Israel that is similar to criticism toward any other country may not be regarded as anti-Semitic. This will never come into play.
Okay.
Because it will just be the first time you criticize Israel. They'll be like, I didn't hear you criticizing Japan right now. I'm not talking about Japan. Yeah. So you love Japan? You hate Israel? You don't? No, I just, okay. Okay. And then we have the great conclusion to this, which is the silliest thing. Subsection C. Nothing in this subsection shall be construed to diminish or infringe upon any right protected under the First Amendment to the United States Constitution or the state constitution. Nothing in this subsection shall be construed to conflict with federal or state discrimination laws. So, it's valid.
So, I mean, it's 4 or 5 pages of breaking the First Amendment, and at the end it says this wasn't actually breaking the First Amendment.
Yeah, don't construe any of this as being against the First Amendment.
I just, like, how dumb do you have to be?
Yeah.
To accept this as
how much do you have to hate America? American values, the Constitution. And the Constitution is pretty great. I mean, especially if you stop at the 11th Amendment, you know, and just forget everything after that. But if it were followed, if the Constitution were followed, it would be pretty great.
Yeah, well, this should just be struck down immediately or not even signed.
Yeah. And so this is from 2019. And I haven't found any news articles that has been struck down at all.
What was the support like? Do you have any idea?
Unanimous.
Oh, so not one person said that this is insane.
So there was at least one Democrat in the subcommittee who protested against it and voted no. And then when it got to the floor, you have to vote yes on this. Do you hate Israel and the Jews? No, I just don't want super unconstitutional laws. You know what I'm saying? DeSantis does.
Wow.
And I'm not saying that DeSantis hasn't done a lot of great things for Florida, but he doesn't serve you primarily.
Right.
He serves another people, both who live here, American citizens, and in a foreign country. And they're more important than you. And I would not let him anywhere near the White House if you have half a brain, like if you care about any American values or anything like that.
Right.
And it's not like you look at different people and you're like, okay, Bernie Sanders, man, he's got some bad policies. No, he doesn't have anything like this, anything even close to this. Okay. So what do you think? Can I go to 2023?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the Bernie Sanders thing. There's a difference between our opinions and his opinions on how to run a country. But if everyone is in good faith, believing in the Constitution and all that, that's small potatoes compared to this type of just anti-American.
Right. Despising the Constitution.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's funny too, because you can't have let's have some big protests against this because number one, they'll say you hate Jews, which you just love the Constitution. So you're out there protesting. And then number two, come 2025, well, God forbid, you know, but he'll make another law saying you can't protest anything related to these or else you're anti-Semitic and therefore you take out a gun and, you know, lock him in a box. Okay. So now we're going to go to the 2023 bill. This is HB 269 that just passed the other day while he was in Israel. Okay. Now, this one is interesting because you read it and you're like, okay, there's not really much here. It's not really that bad, right?
Okay.
But then you look on the news and you see that he's in Israel and he signed it, and you see that Israel loves this bill. And then you realize that the vagueness of this bill, like you got to really dig in, which I did do. And you realize that the vagueness of this bill, like it doesn't look like an anti-Semitism bill. It just looked like some really vague things where they can arrest you for hate crimes if they feel like it. Which way are you going with this? Are you trying to lock up some BLM people who are doing some hateful stuff?
Yeah.
No, you're just trying to lock up white people.
Oh,
Because you're in Israel doing this, we know where you're going with this. So when you look at the vagueness, you can infer from it. Okay. So basically, this covers some controversial stuff and some non-controversial stuff. Okay. So we're just going to go over the introduction to it real quick. And basically, it's the first thing it prohibits, it's a public nuisance bill, prohibiting a person from distributing onto private property any material for the purpose of intimidating or threatening the owner, resident, or invitee of such property. Sounds pretty legit, right?
Okay, seems all right.
Okay. Prohibiting a person from distributing onto private property any material which contains a credible threat to the owner, resident, or invitee of such property.
Do they ever define what a credible threat is? Oh, they do. Okay.
It's brutal. This is where you've got to literally Google the other subsections that aren't mentioned here.
Okay.
And find out what credible threat. It's anything.
Oh, wow.
It's anything. And we're
subjective and
we're going to get to it. So, and then it provides criminal penalties. We'll get to that. Third section, prohibiting a person from willfully and maliciously harassing, threatening, or intimidating another person based on the person's wearing or displaying of any indicia related to any religious or ethnic heritage.
Okay.
So if you're wearing, say, a cross,
right,
and somebody then takes action because of that, okay, that doesn't sound too bad, right? Let's get to it. I'm really glad that you picked out credible threat because that is the other tab up there. That's where we're going. This is you had to dig in to find that. And then for that last one, you requiring that violations be reported as hate crimes. We'll get to that more in detail. Next section, prohibiting the display or projection of images onto a building, structure, or property without permission. Okay.
Okay.
So like projecting onto my private property, something.
Okay.
And then we're going to get to that in a second. And then prohibiting a person who willfully enters the campus of a state university or Florida college system institution for the purpose of threatening or intimidating another person from remaining on such campus after being warned to depart. So they want to exclude certain people from campuses. We'll get to that. And then the last one's stupid, providing interference with certain assemblies. And that one's not going to be that important. Okay.
Okay.
So we're going to go to the first one here. Basically, okay, so the first one not even to mention there is like dumping litter. Okay, and then it provides the exact measurements and penalty, you know? And basically they say if you dump litter, it's a misdemeanor.
Okay.
Within these certain amounts, right? And then section B of that says if you violate subparagraph 1 by intentionally dumping litter onto private property for the purpose of intimidating the owner, resident, or invitee of such property, and such litter contains a credible threat, the person commits a felony of the 3rd degree, 5 years in prison, punishable as provided. Okay. The term credible threat has the same meaning as in section 784.048, subsection 1. We're going to go to that and find out what a credible threat is. Okay. This is going to blow your mind. Credible threat means a verbal or nonverbal threat or a combination of the two, including threats delivered by electronic communication or implied by a pattern of conduct, which places the person who is the target of the threat in reasonable fear for his or her safety or the safety of his or her family members or individuals closely associated with the person, and which is made with the apparent ability to carry out the threat to cause such harm. It is not necessary to prove that the person making the threat had the intent to actually carry out the threat. The present incarceration of the person making the threat is not a bar to prosecution under this section.
Okay.
So you just have to perceive it as a threat.
Right. They just have to feel like they're in reasonable fear for his or her safety.
Right. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if there was an intent to carry out said threat. So, I mean, basically, so we're talking about literature here. When they say that littering, we're talking about pamphleting. So if I hand you a pamphlet and say, hey, did you know about, and just say, even a conspiracy there, you know, like say I say, well, we're not going to talk about whether or not it's a conspiracy. Let's say I say 9/11, here's a pamphlet, right? You could look at this and be like, I think this doesn't mention the Jews, but I think, oh, I'm scared. Oy vey. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then you're under arrest. 5 years.
Awesome.
And imagine you get a Jewish guy in front of a jury and they're like, oh, I think they're trying to Holocaust me or something,
right.
you know? And then it's like the jury's like, oh, I'm not anti-Semitic. 5 years for you.
Right.
Just the amount of tyranny in this is insane.
Right. The open-endedness is not good.
Right. And if you hadn't gone to look up credible threat and stuff, you might not realize it, you know?
Right.
And then basically it says, if the penalty for a violation of this subparagraph is reclassified under 775.085, such a violation is considered a hate crime for purposes of reporting requirements of Section 877.19. If you look at Section 877.19, that's the Hate Crimes Reporting Act.
Okay.
And basically you just get classified as a hate crimer, and it goes into the records as a Florida hate crime. Even though, whatever. Okay, right? This is insane.
Yeah.
So basically, then the next one is harassment or intimidation based on religious or ethnic heritage. It's the exact same thing. And then it's if there's a credible threat. I mean, you could say a racial slur. You shouldn't say racial slurs. You shouldn't just go around denigrating your fellow Americans or tourists or just like anybody. Like, be a decent person, we'll say. Yeah. But you have a First Amendment right to do so long as they're not fighting words, because fighting words then break the law, you know?
Okay.
But you're allowed to. You see homeless people in the cities just shouting obscenities, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're constitutionally allowed to do that. Not in Florida, though.
Wow.
Because the First Amendment doesn't apply to one group of people, we'll say. Well, this covers everybody, but it's only going to be enforced one way, which we know because he went to Israel to sign it. And he got applauded by his friends over there. And do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's just going to target white people. Or like, there's a black Hebrew, remember?
Yeah, the black Israelites?
Hebrew Israelites. Yeah, good. Right. They're welcome to think whatever they want. You could Louis Farrakhan it if you want. You're welcome to think, and you're welcome to say whatever you want. It's the United States of America was, not Florida. Okay. And then basically, okay. A person may not willfully and maliciously harass or intimidate another person based on the person's wearing or displaying of any. Okay, we read that. And then it goes to a person who violates that. It's a misdemeanor. If there's a credible threat, which means they perceive a credible threat, now it's a felony, 5 years, and it gets hate crime reported, you know? So the displaying of a projection, I'm not really going to go into because I don't think you should be projecting onto my private property. It should kind of be like there's a wall around my property.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't mess with it, especially if it's like scaring kids. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like just leave people's personal property alone. You know, it's a fundamental American value. I don't think it's that interesting. Anyways, then it goes to some driver's license stuff. And then we get down to if you willfully and maliciously interrupt or disturb any school or any assembly of people met for the worship of God, any assembly of people met for the purpose of acknowledging the death of an individual, commits a misdemeanor, right?
Okay.
Like you can't run into a church and be like, I hate you Christians or whatever. You know what I mean? It's kind of rude.
Yeah.
It's their place. But what it's added to there is if there's now a credible threat, if they perceive a credible threat, that's now a felony, 5 years. And if it's a hate crime, it gets reported as a hate crime. So they're adding that onto pre-existing, you know? And then basically they do the one where you go into anywhere in the Florida college system.
Okay.
And there's specifically college. It's not like K to 12. It's college. You go on a college campus and then you do anything that's intimidating, you know? It's a misdemeanor. And then if there's a credible threat, so you just can't say anything. Just keep your mouth shut, head down, because this is not like a area of discussion and learning. This is a doctrination camp, period.
100%.
And you could even say, well, Florida, they're probably indoctrinating them in the good way. Maybe for now. But the reason the First Amendment exists is so that, right?
Right.
So that there's a free discourse of ideas. Anyways, and then that's basically the content of the 2023 one.
Okay.
And so you see how if you weren't looking at the credible threat part and stuff, it would just look like, oh, okay.
Or taking into account the older bill or the trip to Israel for this most recent one, you put it all together and it doesn't paint a great picture.
Right. Yeah. But it's an extension past K through 20 of that other stuff. And it's just prohibiting free speech.
Right.
And whereas this one doesn't say only like anti-Semitic stuff, you know that's what he's talking about because he went to Israel to sign it. It's only the second time done only by one person, signed the legislature overseas. You know?
Wow. It's just the open-endedness of it all. It's all about the person perceiving things. It reminds me of just people who need a safe space and all that for something that, like when we were growing up, it was just something that happened and you just keep going on with life.
Right.
And now those people are the ones who are determining if, they felt violated or, whatever.
Right.
And it's so open-ended.
Right. And what's that quote that says something like, find out who you can't...
to find out who's in control, find out who you're not allowed to talk about.
Criticize. Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's what we got here. And so you could disagree with that point right there and say, oh, there's, you know what I mean? Okay, that's fine. We could discuss that, but just not in Florida.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? And I want to discuss that, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because, some people, like, for example, I seen this video, I told you about it, but it's hilarious, and it's this black guy and he's got this sign and he says, Jews control everything. He's in Central Park. And you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
And it's got some list of some names of some Jews, and I don't know who those Jews are, And then basically, like, the guy comes up and it ends up into a comedic thing where it's hilarious, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But should he be allowed to have that sign? I disagree with it, because when they were talking to him, he said, Jews own every building in New York City. I'm going to guess that that's a fact. That's not true. A fact. I guess that that's absolutely not true. There's many buildings in New York City not owned by Jews. Is he allowed to say that? Yeah. Was it hyperbole when he said it? Maybe. I can't determine that. Was he actually believing that 100%? He's allowed to say it. We're allowed to have a discourse about that, right?
Yeah, totally. It seems like it.
Not in Florida.
Not in Florida.
Right. And so basically, my opinion is that if you just hate the Constitution, you hate American values, you hate Western values, DeSantis might be a great pick for you. But if you were to cast a vote for DeSantis, I believe you are trash, just absolute trash. And that's a bold statement. I wouldn't say it unless, man, this guy's terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible. And you can't do some good things and then, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
You could do some minor bad things, so for example, we could talk about Trump,
Okay.
and we could say, well, he assassinated Soleimani. And you could be like, well, maybe that was a good thing. And we could have a discussion about that. You know what I mean? But Trump didn't drop trowel and take a dump on America's face. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
This is doing that. It's not just controversial. It's anti-American.
Right.
100%. And I mean, if I know the definition of treason is constitutionally written, but I'm sorry.
It is not enough.
It's not enough, because if you're selling out your country to a foreign nation, to a foreign people, I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's interesting that the America First movement is this new thing. That should be everyone's movement. Even if you're a Democrat.
I agree.
You should always be putting America first. And we have different methods. Cool. We talk about them and all that. But that's a strange idea now. That's insane.
That is insane. And Democrats should co-opt that. They should 100%. Be like, we're real America first. You don't even talk about the homeless.
Right.
You don't even talk about universal health care. And then just make it different plans for America first.
Right.
But.
Yeah. It is what it is.
Yeah. That's all I got.
All right. So what are your thoughts on this? Do you agree with the idea that DeSantis has different allegiance? Do you think that that's okay to single out certain people and protect them more than everyone else, to violate the Constitution? How important is the Constitution to you? Is it like an outdated document that, even if you do think that, it's still the law and needs to be observed until it gets changed through legal processes? Let us know your thoughts on all the different aspects of this. There's a lot that we went over, and we hope to see you next time.